Welcome back to Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Dave. We are in the third season, so welcome in, get cozy, grab a drink, maybe some hot cocoa, and let's get this show underway. Thank you for tuning in. So, I wanted to talk today about social media. Not really, but kind of. But we'll get there. I was thinking about how when I'm feeling lonely or just when I'm feeling anything, and I need to take a break, I have my comfort movies. And I think all of us have our comfort movies or our comfort albums or TV shows or books or whatever it is. Something that is not created by us. Something that is not live TV, something that is not something that is not unfolding, in front of you, like sports or the news or whatever. But something you can go back to and feel that nice warm blanket of security, that feeling of wearing a snug hoodie that makes you feel warm, but it's something that you're watching. And if you don't, I think it's something that you should, revisit some movies or whatever it is you like. Like I can't speak for my mom, but I can probably speak for my dad. I can't imagine there's too many movies in the last 30 years that he's rewatched more than once. I think a movie that he's probably seen a bunch of times that came out in my lifetime is Die Hard, because that's just a great movie. And now it's a Christmas movie, which it always was. And it's just funny how the internet works. And we're going to get to the internet. But my comfort movies range, and I think a lot of you that know me, even just by listening to the podcast or watching the YouTube show, Jaws is definitely a comfort movie for me. I could pick any of the original Star Wars trilogy, and those will be comfortable. Even even Episode 1, Phantom Menace, just because I've seen it so many times. It's something that I could put on. I know it's going to happen. I know every beat. I know most of the lines, so I can be doing something and look up and know exactly what Misa gonna say. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is the same way. I've probably seen each one of those movies in its regular theatrical format probably 5 or 6 times each, and then double that, and I've seen the special editions. Those are your numbers. So I've wasted a big portion of my life watching the Lord of the Rings movies. For some of the MCU movies, I can put them on and just kind of like their comfort movies, but I have a dark place up in here. And sometimes the best way to fight it is by watching something or listening to something that's objectively very dark. And one of those movies and one of those directors kind of holds a place for me is David Fincher. Now, before you go thinking that I'm some type of serial killer or schizophrenic person that fights himself, I'm not. But I do enjoy the art of David Fincher movies. And David Fincher, if you're not familiar with the name, let's just run down some of his filmography. Seven, Fight Club, Social Network, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Alien 3, the Netflix series Mindhunter, Panic Room, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Game. I think I said 7. Yeah, I said 7 already. And there's a bunch more. Alien 3 was his first movie. He started his career in directing music videos. Off the top of my head, the one that comes to mind is Madonna's Express Yourself. Fincher became one of my favorite directors. I think it was the 1-2 punch of 7 and Fight Club. But then going further into his career, the movie Social Network was the movie that really sold me as him being my favorite modern director, and that being one of my favorite movies of all time. Social Network, which is the movie I do want to talk about today, is the early story of Mark Zuckerberg, and his creation of Facebook. But I just finished watching that. It's my first movie that I watched this year in 2025. Happy New Year. It is a movie that I have probably seen 30 times, give or take, maybe 20 times. One of those movies that if I'm doing something that I want to do on the couch and I need a movie to put on that I don't need to pay attention to, but it has my absolute attention span, That's the movie I put on. Social Network, starring Jesse Eisenberg, Andrew Garfield, Justin Timberlake, Brenda Song, a few others in there. And it's just, it's a classic. It's a modern masterpiece. It's a classic. It came out in 2010, and it won a couple of Oscars, I believe, including for the score. And there's just this, if it's a movie you've never seen before and you haven't dove into his movies, he does a lot of movies that are based off of books or, other source material. So Fight Club was a Chuck Palahniuk book. Social Network is based off the book. What's it called? I can't remember the name of the book that it's based off of, as well as Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And he works with and obviously the girl with the dragon tattoo is based off the original novel by Stieg Larsson, which spawned three movie trilogy in Sweden. But he only got a chance to make the first movie, and I have no clue why the other movies didn't get made. And I know some people had a problem, like didn't love his version, but goddamn, that movie caused me to go read the books, and I read the first three books. So it did its job, right? But his movies have a feel to them. They have a look to them. He is also very known for the fact that he is a perfectionist in his filmmaking, where he will do as many takes as it takes to get the scene right. And a lot of actors and actresses have gone on record talking about his process, and they say it's torture, but at the same time, none of them say they never want to work with him again. They all, you look at the finished product and his movies. You could make a list of the top 25 movies in the last 40 years, or maybe let's say top 100 movies of the last 40 years. A couple of his movies are going to be on there. Seven's definitely going to be on there. Fight Club's going to be on there. Social Network's going to be on there. It's almost, you can't really argue with it, because across the board, people have seen those movies and nobody's like, I think they're bad movies. Some people are horrified with them. A lot of people associate like a bro culture with Fight Club. I think that's something that popped up maybe later on, maybe 10, 15 years after the fact, because when that movie came out, that wasn't any terminology that anybody used about that movie. And it's just such a fantastic film. Seven, horrifying, and you could put that into horror for sure. It's definitely one of the most horrific movies of all time, especially because you don't see a lot of what's described in the movie. The murders, you do see some of the grisly aftermaths, but as the movie progresses, you see less and less, and you're just kind of told, which is more horrifying, because the less you see, the more your imagination kind of wanders. And Social Network is not that movie. Social Network is definitely a look at the people involved in the creation of Facebook. And it's interesting because Zuckerberg is played by Jesse Eisenberg, and he is the perfect person to play Mark Zuckerberg. And it's really funny because later on in his career, he'd go on to play Lex Luthor in Batman Superman. He was also playing Mark Zuckerberg in that role too. There's definitely, and Aaron Sorkin scripts The Social Network, and Sorkin, if you're not aware of his background, created The West Wing, Newsroom on HBO. He's worked with tons of great people, but he is very much a very unique writer in the way that his dialogue comes. What's the word I'm looking for? The way his characters talk, the flow of the dialogue, the rapid fire speed that it comes out. Sorkin and Tarantino write very similar dialogue. And it's just his characters are laced with this tongue, and it's a cocaine tongue. And, Sorkin talked about his background in using coke and being, very big into drugs. And then he got sober, and I'm glad he did, because we still have him here and he's still working. But the script is just, it's such a rapid fire movie when it comes to the dialogue. And it's one of those movies that I can, if I have a lot going on in my head, I can really be settled down by the fact that this movie's on, and maybe it's because it overpowers anything else going on in my head. I'm focused on it, and I can multitask too while I'm watching this movie. Uh, I remember seeing it, and there's one of the reasons why I was so attracted to the project and so excited to see it before it came out, and I'll share that with you in a moment. Some of you probably kind of know, but I saw this movie at the ArcLight in West Hollywood, which was one of the greatest movie theaters in the country, right next to Amoeba Records on Sunset Boulevard. Sunset or Hollywood Boulevard? Sunset Boulevard. And I saw it opening night, and I'm trying to remember who I saw it with. I might have seen it with my old friend Kevin. And yeah, I think we went to California together. Pardon me if I'm wrong, because I don't know who else I would have seen it with. Maybe Scott? I don't think it was you, Scott. I think it was Kevin. I should probably bleep out his last name. Joe, cut his last name. And the ArcLight was just the most fantastic place to see it, and I loved it. And that was 2010. And like I said, I've seen it at least once a year, every year since then, but probably have seen it closer to 20-25 times. But the reason that attracted me to the project ultimately was the fact that Trent Reznor and his new scoring partner, Atticus Ross, were scoring the movie in full. And this would be Trent's first full foray into composing for a feature movie film. He had previously done the game Quake, or was it Quake 2? I think it was Quake. He did some music for, including the soundtrack, but some music for Lost Highway. And then he did a remix specifically for Seven of the song Closer. And so there was some more music in there. But this was the first time he was scoring a major motion picture. And, it's still my favorite film score all around, outside of, I think, John Williams stuff. And it's definitely my favorite score from a modern movie. I doubt I could say that I enjoy, you know what? I don't know, because I can tell you I listen to this, and I have listened to this soundtrack as frequently as some Nine Inch Nails albums. Whereas, the Star Wars score lives rent-free in my head. I don't know if I actively listened to it in the last 30 years, but it's always there. And, the movies. But John Williams aside, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, and this was the first, like I said, and it led to this career, aside from Nine Inch Nails, that Trent has had, that has put him one award short of an EGOT, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. And obviously he hasn't done anything on Broadway yet. It's only a matter of time for the both of them. It was sublime to hear this soundtrack independent from the film. It is so iconic at this point that, there are certain other musicians that have gotten their career started in film scoring, I think because of the success that Trent and Atticus had with Social Network, and then doing, I forgot about Gone Girl, another great Fincher movie. They would go on to do, so far, every David Fincher movie that's happened since Social Network. So that's Gone Girl, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mank, Killer, and I feel like I'm forgetting one more, and it's going to haunt me. But it is something that I'm like super, proud to see his career turn. And I love Nine Inch Nails, and, I'm glad that if Trent doesn't get sober, Trent's dead. He'd already died once. He overdosed once. Him not getting sober would have been the death of him permanently. He would have, it would have never ended good. But I'm like seeing his transformation into this musical fucking scoring these movies has made me enjoy those movies even that much more than I already would have. And it's so when that was announced, I was like, man, this is awesome. And the first track in the movie, I think, is Hand Covers Bruise. And I've just seen it used so many different times in so many different ways. And the opening of Social Network, the way that after that first scene where Zuckerberg or Jesse Eisenberg is running through campus, and it's just these like beautiful kind of portrait shots, these beautiful establishing shots, and something's, there's stuff going on in there, and you just would see Eisenberg run through, or he's running this way. That movie is a mood, as it's as much of a mood as it is a fantastic piece of film, as well as a portrait of a person. And Zuckerberg, who, fuck that guy, but Zuckerberg has said, oh, none of the stuff, most of the stuff in the movie isn't true, but they got the clothing that he wore right. It's very interesting because well, I can't say that but I do find myself siding with some of the arguments. They really do pose both sides of, did he steal this from the combination of the Winklevoss twins and Divya Narendra? And did he really screw Eduardo Sabarin out of all this? And they all sued him, and they all, he all settled. And we obviously know where the story progresses, how he becomes, the billionaire villain. I mean, if you're a billionaire, you're automatically a villain, because you shouldn't have that much money when everybody else has so much less. It comes to a point where, like, okay, you don't need that much more money. Like, your company can just help everyone else instead of spying on them or selling their secrets to another country or helping to rig elections. But that's not what this is about, even though it's true. But this movie, it's a runtime's about 2 hours. I literally just finished watching it. I needed to watch something to kind of like just settle some things in my head, and it did the job. I feel great. I'm recording a podcast. But if you haven't seen it, I implore you do. Even if you have no interest, it's like watching just a lot of that movie just feels like a perfectly written play. Like scene. There's a story, there's great music, there's great cinematography, but you're really getting like these great scenes of awesome dialogue. And the bit players in it are really good. There's some people that weren't super famous now that are kind of more famous. Rooney Mara, to actually be hit the nail on the head. She's in the opening scene and one other scene. It was her first movie. And that is what caused Fincher to cast her in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo as Lisbeth Salander. And she was fantastic in that movie, which I'm probably going to watch that tonight. And dark movies do definitely make me feel better. And it's definitely not the case for a lot of people. For some people, it definitely is. I think some people need feel good, happy movies when they're not in a good mood. And I'm the opposite. Like music that I listen to when I'm not feeling that well up here, be stuff like Brand New's The Devil and God Are Raging Inside of Me, Nine Inch Nails' The Fragile. I will listen to Pearl Jam, like No Code. But I tend to lean into somber songs, somber music when I'm feeling somber. And but I Fincher is one of those, like I said, one of those directors that like almost anything I could put on at any time. I mean, Alien 3 is his first movie that he ended up walking off of because of studio interference. And at the time, I actually liked Alien 3. And then I think, because I saw it in the theater when it came out, and then as I read the original story, which is the original script's great. There's a lot of changes from the original story. There's a lot of what was filmed that was left on the cutting room floor. But as I got older and I watched that movie again and again, I actually really liked that movie. But I wonder if it's because of the eye of Fincher and the shots and the way that movie is framed and the color palette and the darkness. But it's definitely one of the movies that I think is among people in their 40s to 50s that saw that movie when it came out. It's one of the most divisive movies. People hate it. They look back at it and they're like, oh, that was terrible. Some people haven't seen it in 25 or 30 years or whatever. And, I did reflect on it a lot later 10 years, 15 years after it came out. And I was like, you know what? I actually kind of dig this movie. It's not going to ever, will never be better than Alien or Aliens, but in succession, those movies are as good as they, were. Like Alien 3 is the third best Alien movie. I'll go with Romulus as my fourth, or maybe Prometheus is my fourth, but let's get back on track with David Fincher and his movies. So yeah, this is the soundtrack, the original vinyl soundtrack for The Social Network, and this opens up a real floodgate to the careers of Atticus and Trent as composers. Obviously, Nine Inch Nails does not need the floodgate already open. They broke that and kicked it down, in the 90s, the late 80s, I should say, with Pretty Hate Machine, and then Downward Spiral, and then Fragile, etc., etc. But they go on to do all these Fincher movies. One of the most surprising movies that they ended up scoring was Soul, which was a Pixar movie about music, and then it was with John Batiste, so they did half the soundtrack each. And then the TMNT animated movie and the Watchmen series on HBO, which was fucking fantastic. But this is like when you love a couple of things, like you love this, and then all of a sudden they come together. Like, let's say you're a big fan of peanut butter and you're a big fan of jelly, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this is a peanut butter jelly sandwich. David Fincher working with Trent and Atticus is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's bacon, egg, and cheese. It's pepperoni and pizza. It's chocolate raisin bran. Blah. I'm just kidding. It's orange juice and milk. But you get what I'm trying to say. It's a match made in heaven, and I am so happy that it exists. And I'm so glad that this movie exists. Now, the deplorability of every character in that movie, whether it's, the Winklevi coming after him with Divian, saying that they invented Facebook. And one of my favorite lines is, what does he say? He says, oh, shit. If you would invent it, play the clip, Joe. Just play the clip. If you invented Facebook, then you would have invented Facebook.
You really don't need a forensics team to get to the bottom of this. If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you'd have invented Facebook.
But I love that line. I love just the venom that Aaron Sorkin writes with every character. Even Rooney Mara's character is amazing. And that in the beginning of the movie, she says, Mark, you're going to go through life thinking people don't like you because you're a nerd. And it's not. It's because they think you're an asshole. And that's kind of like the beginning of the movie, and it sets the tone. So there's just something about that movie that I absolutely love. But, not all of my comfort movies are kind of dark. Yeah, I was trying to think of something that isn't, but like even the Lord of the Rings movies, sure, it ends well. And, the four endings of the last movie have a very nice, bright spot to it, even though Frodo goes to the Undying Lands. But yeah, I just like dark stuff. What am I going to say? I would love to hear from you, my listener. What are your comfort movies? We can do maybe one, about albums at a later date, or TV shows or whatever. But I'd love to hear what your comfort movies on. And they don't have to be like because you need, you're depressed or you're sad and you need mental comforting. Just things that you put on that you always enjoy. They always provide you with that literal escape from whatever life is got going on, and or stuff you watch when you have your days off or whatever it is. I'd love to hear what your comfort movies are. That kind of fascinates me, and it's a question that I don't really ask too many people. I know, like my buddy Will, I know some of his comfort movies because I know what he watches when he's just wants to put something on in the background. And if you don't have comfort movies, well, get one. I don't know. Are you one of those people that I don't like movies? I know a couple people like that. I don't like movies. Joe. Sorry. But yeah, it fascinates me to what people's comforts are when it comes to putting on movies, because movies, what they are really supposed to do is transport you somewhere else for that allotted amount of time, whether it is you're lost in the world, or you're lost in laughing at the movie or laughing with the movie. Madam Web, great case in point. If you watch that movie and you laugh at it, you actually will enjoy it because it's laughable. But speaking of movies, I just saw Nosferatu the day after Christmas, and that's Robert Eggers' fourth movie. The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and now Nosferatu. Now, I know some people are having certain reactions to it, whether they didn't enjoy it, they didn't like the character, or they didn't like how dark it was, or they didn't enjoy it because everybody else is liking it and the people that are liking it are film snobs or whatever. Let's just get all that noise out of here. From a technical standpoint, it was a fucking gorgeous movie. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that looked as well lit, appropriately naturally lit. That, like, it was like you know what Tim Burton tried to do with Sleepy Hollow, but it was Tim Burton-esque. This is what it would have been if it like looked less Tim Burton-y. I don't know. It's that's probably not a good way to talk about it, but it was gorgeous. It was haunting. It was very, very well acted. But to talk about Bill Skarsgård and his portrayal of Nosferatu and the things that he did to get into that character, his character was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And he wasn't terrifying because he was like, his actions were, it was the way that he carried himself. It was the way that he talked. It was the and then the wheezing. It is really a masterpiece, this movie. And it is unlike any version of Dracula we've seen. We've seen pieces of it because he obviously takes a huge piece of inspiration from what came before, but he does something new with it. And I do plan on seeing it again before it leaves theaters. It probably will be in theaters for a little while because it's one of those word of mouth movies. Like I'm telling you about it. Maybe it causes a couple people to see it. It won't gross $1 billion or anything, but goddamn, this movie deserves to be successful. The score was amazing. Like I said, the cinematography, the locations they shot in, I believe they shot in Czech Republic or Romania, one of the two. But just the details that Eggers puts into his films, the performances from Nicholas Hoult, from Lily Rose Depp, and Skarsgård, and Willem Dafoe, and what's her name that I can't remember, Emma something, who played, who was in Deadpool Wolverine, bald chick, who I was convinced during the movie, I was like, is that a Fanning? But I realized it wasn't. Anyway, it's the most recent movie I've seen. I've been looking forward to it, just like all of my horror movie friends have been looking forward to seeing it since it was announced. And Eggers, this is a 4 for 4. The Witch is one of my favorite movies, period. Lighthouse is fantastic. The Northman was fantastic. And now we've got Nosferatu as being, so far, was my favorite movie of 2024. So yeah. But yeah, I could see that's going to be one of those movies that I watch I watch a lot of times in my life because of the fact that it's something that I enjoy so much. I mean, The Witch is definitely one of those movies. I need to revisit The Northman, and I haven't watched The Lighthouse in a little bit, so it's probably worth revisiting it. I just watched The Witch, I got a couple days before Halloween to prepare for my talks with Becky Cloonan and Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones and Daniel Warren Johnson about horror movies. But yeah, I once again, if you've never seen Social Network, I would implore that you watch it. If you have never listened to the soundtrack independently from the movie, put it on, because it might lead you down the rabbit hole of listening to other scores that Trent and Atticus have done, and maybe visiting some of the projects that they've done scores for that you haven't seen. Case in point, if you've never watched the Watchmen TV series, which came out end of 2019 into 2020, I believe, because it kind of coincided with when COVID broke out, and we started to see a lot of similar things happening in this country that was reflected in the show, except the show was written before that stuff happened. Police wearing masks, a lot of different things. It was the first HBO series where they had an additional podcast to it. I'm pretty sure, unless Chernobyl came first, but Lindelof, and I forget who his guest host is, they do a podcast about the making of The Watchmen, the making of the episodes, talking about the episodes. It's actually really brilliant, and Watchmen is still one of my favorite TV shows of all time, if not my single favorite limited series of all time, because I can't think of something that I've come back to so many times to watch, and also mentally I've come back to it so many times. So, Watchmen, Atticus, Trent, The Social Network. It's a world that like I love being a part of. The fact that they've worked with so many good people, including obviously David Fincher. So if you've never watched The Social Network, please do. And I really would love to hear from you down below. Let me know what your favorite comfort movies are. They don't have to be dark. They don't, it's just something you come back to a lot that brings you that internal happiness that balances you out, whatever it is. I'd love to hear from you down below. And let's just kick it off and kick it out of here with saying you can comment on Spotify. You can also jump into YouTube and throw a comment down below and tell me what your comfort movies are. Unfortunately, Apple, Amazon, and most of the other podcast platforms do not have the ability to leave comments. But you can also follow me on Instagram at Direct Edition Podcast and drop a comment down below when I drop the preview or the reel from this episode. And that being said, friends, we are in the third season. Let's put this podcast on the radar. Share it with a friend. Just share it with a friend. Pick an episode. Be like, hey, Jimmy. Hey, Sammy. Hey, Frankie. Melissa. Whoever. Say, I think you would like this podcast. You can interact with it on Spotify by, like I said, commenting. Please rate it. You can rate it also on Apple. I don't know if the others have rating systems. You can hit the like button on YouTube and drop a comment. Once again, the Instagram, it exists for a reason, so we can talk, so you can share your thoughts. But, if you put something public, like a good comment or something, hey, I'll read it right here on the podcast and give you credit. And since I'm recording this before the third season drops, well, sorry, it'll have to be later on in the season. But yes, watch The Social Network, enjoy movies, find your comfort zone, do stuff. Don't forget to hit the like button. Remember, this is Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Dave. See you next week.